Hello, I'm Isabel Ribeiro. I'm a researcher at Mountain Research Center, Instituto Politécnico of Bragança, Portugal. And I'm presenting the paper, An Assessment of Food Consumption Practices in the Mozambican provinces of Inhambane and Gaza, Implications for Mycotoxin Exposure Risk. Diet studies have been widely used in the literature to establish association of causal relationships between the eating habits of an individual or population and their health status. Mycotoxins, secondary metabolites produced by certain filamentous fungi, when ingested by humans, are responsible for several disorders affecting the gastrointestinal system, the urogenital system, the vascular system, the renal system, and the nervous system. Therefore, they are considered potentiators of various types of diseases and cancers: breast, lung, brain, skin, and colon, among others. Africa has climate conditions, humidity, and high temperatures that favor the emergence and proliferation of these organisms, and food contamination by fungi and mycotoxins is frequent and high. Furthermore, the agricultural practices employed and the precarious socioeconomic and food security conditions of the population increase the risk of contamination. In Mozambique, climate change, particularly scarce or irregular rainfall (drought), is the main cause of food insecurity and malnutrition in the country, especially in the provinces of Nampula, Tete, Manica, Gaza, Inhambane, and Maputo, as well as floods in the provinces of Sofala, Manica, and Gaza. Furthermore, approximately 80% of the population depends on agriculture. Main crops are corn, cassava, and peanuts, are highly susceptible to mycotoxins. The limited number of studies and the lack of monitoring make the risk high. Objectives: to characterize the eating habits of the local populations of the Gaza and Inhambane provinces in Mozambique, to determine whether there were differences in average median monthly consumption by province, Gaza and Inhambane, place of residence, rural and urban, gender, female and male, age group, 0 to 12 years old, children, 13 to 17 years old, adolescents, 18 to 29 years old, young adults, 30 to 59 years adults, and plus 16 years seniors. Methodology: a quantitative cross-sectional research. A food frequency questionnaire was administered in Gaza and Inhambane in the districts marked in Figure 1. Criteria for choosing these regions. 1. There are two provinces in the southern region of the country that produce the highest number of crops prone to fungal and mycotoxin contamination, such as corn, peanuts, and beans. 2. They are the provinces in Mozambique with the highest number of households experiencing acute food insecurity, with a growing trend in recent years. 3. The lack of gender studies at the local level. Food frequency questionnaire validated for Portugal, adapted to include foods from Mozambican culture. Foods were categorized according to the Food Guide Pyramid by Philip et al. The amount of food consumed was defined in portions, specifically grams and/or household measurements such as cups or tablespoons. A pilot test was administered to the heads of 6 households in the Maracujá district to identify any confusing or unclear questions as perceived by respondents. Questionnaire structure. Questions about the respondent's socioeconomic profile, questions related to individual eating habits, questions about the average monthly frequency and quantity of foods consumed, divided into 9 food groups. dairy products, oils and fats, eggs, meat and fish, bread, cereal and similar products, sweets and pastries, vegetables, fruits, beverages, and other foods. Non-probability convenience sampling, calculation of absolute and relative frequencies, and measurements of central tendency, mean, median, and mode, and dispersion, standard deviation. The normality of variables was tested using the Kolmogorov-Smirnov tests to compare 2, 3, or more independent groups. The Mann-Whitney and the Kruskal-Wallis tests were used. A significance level of 5% was used. Results. The sample involved members of 55 families, totaling 300 individuals. In Gaza, the number was 151, and in Inhambane, the number was 149. Profile of the head of the household. Live in an urban area, 54.5%, female, 58.2%, age inferior to 53 years old, 78.2%, married or in a marital union, 70.9%, educational qualifications up to the first cycle of high school, 52.7%, household of 2 to 5 members, 54.5%, family income range from 5.8 to 11.4 meticais, 77.94 to 150 euros, 63.6%. Were evangelical, 40%, or Catholic, 21.8%. They worked with a formal contract, 49.2%, or were self-employed, 40%. Professions, farmer, 16.4%, teacher, 16.4%, merchant, 9.1%, peasant, 9.1%, and driver, 5.5%. Origin of products consumed by families. National purchase, 40.2%. Local purchase, 31.5%. On production, 56.9%. And products imported, 1.4%. Eating habits. Only 38 of a total of 300 individuals eat meals outside the home. Gaza, the number was 15. In Inhambane, the number was 23. They prefer to eat at a kiosk stall or restaurant 2 to 3 times a month. Eating habits. Only 38 of a total of 300 individuals eat meals outside the home. In Gaza, the number was 15. In Inhambane, the number was 23. They prefer to eat at a kiosk, stall, or restaurant 2 to 3 times a month. Dairy products. Milk was the most representative food with 51.4%, followed by yogurts, 17.1%, and other milks, 14.1%. In Inhambane, milk consumption was more significant, with 62.3% than in Gaza, 33.3%. Oils and fats. Oil, 54.2%, butter, 18.9%, and olive oil, 15.5%, were the main products. The distribution was similar in both provinces. Eggs, meat, and fish. Fresh fish, 24.4%, eggs, 22.2%, and chicken, 14%, stood out, consumed by most families. In Gaza, fresh fish had a greater representation, with 26.2%, compared to Inhambane, with 22.3%. Bread, cereal, and similar. Rice, 31.7%, bread, 20.7%, and xima, with 13.6%, were the most consumed, with marked differences. Bread was more important in Gaza, 25.2%, while rice had the greatest weight in Inhambane, 35.4%. Sweets and pastries. Sugar was the most representative product with 54.1%, followed by cookies 15.1% and fried foods 12.8%. In Inhambane, fried foods had a greater weight, 14.1%, than in Gaza, 11.4%. Vegetables and legumes. Onions, 30.7%, lettuce, watercress, 6.6%, and bell peppers, 6.3%, were the most common. The same trend was observed in Inhambane. In Gaza, cabbage has a higher share than bell peppers. Cowpeas, onions, and other beans are consumed by almost all families. Fruits. The most consumed products were mango, 23.5%, fresh tomato, 18.4%, and banana, 7.3%. Almost all families reported frequent consumption of mango, 97%, tomato, 98%, and banana, 94%. Water accounted for the largest share of consumption, 67.1%, followed by tea, 14.6%, and soft drinks, 6%. In Gaza, soft drinks were consumed most, while in Inhambane, fruit juice consumption stood out. Other foods. Coconut curry, 23.8%, and peanut curry, 33.6%, were the most popular, especially in Inhambane, where vegetable soup, 10.3%, also stood out. In Gaza, mayonnaise had the highest share, 17.1%. Comparative analysis of monthly consumption by food group. Province, Gaza, higher consumption of oils and fats, breads, and cereals. In Inhambane, more dairy products, fruits, and beverages. Statistically, consumption is equal for eggs, meat, and fish, sweets, pastries, and others. In terms of environment, statistically significant differences exist in all food groups, except for vegetables. Equal consumption in rural and urban areas. Consumption of these foods is higher in urban areas. Comparative analysis of monthly consumption by food group. By gender, there were differences in the dairy food group. Women consume larger amounts than men. In other groups, no statistically significant differences. By age groups, difference only in the beverages group. Children and adolescents in group 1, they have a lower consumption. Young adults, adult, and elderly from group 2, they have a higher consumption. Other food groups, no statistical differences, but with interesting trends. Seniors, they eat more vegetables. Children, more sweets and oils. And young people, more dairy products. Consumption of foods easily contaminated by fungi or mycotoxins. Dairy and dairy products, consumed with significant frequency. Rice, highest daily consumption with 82.4% consumed daily, 44.7% 2 to 3 times a day. Eczema, also high and regular consumption. Cassava, peanuts, and beans, consumed with significant frequency. Risk of mycotoxin contamination. The diet of these families included large quantities of foods either produced by themselves or purchased from local and national markets, which are easily contaminated by fungi and mycotoxins. Consumption varies by province, place of residence, gender, and age. The greatest impact: urban environment, more consumption, women, dairy products, young people, adults, elderly people, more beverages. Food risk: rice and eczema due to their high frequency of consumption and the risk of mycotoxins. Implication: the need for food safety policies and surveillance of high-risk foods. Thank you for your attention.